Говорят о том, что Россию нужно поделить на десятки мелких государственных образований. И понятно для чего, чтобы затем подчинить своей воле, эксплуатировать, использовать в своих корыстных интересах.
Right, folks. When I was making my last video about Russian President Putin and his statement about Finnish Karelian question, I pumped into fairly interesting material. I've always known that there is pro-Karelia movements inside Finland, but I had no idea that there is actually a separatist movement inside Karelia. And what makes it even more interesting is the connection to Ukraine war. All right, before we go any further, let's look into the historical background of this area and what actually is the reason for this kind of activity today. The peace treaty between the Soviet Russia and Finland was signed in the town of Tartu in present-day Estonia, 14th October 1920. And that gave the borders of modern Finland, actually the only borders that has been mutually accepted by the Soviets or by the Russians and the Finns. All the other borders are either forced or fought over with. Anyways, many of the Finnish Patriots were not happy with the borders because it's left vast areas in Karelia and Ingria in mercy of the Soviet Bolsheviks. And that caused a movement in Finland. First, Finns helped the Estonians in the Estonian Freedom War or Liberation War. There was Finnish volunteers which were pretty essential for the whole war, and they were encouraged by that, and they did incursions to eastern Karelia. I think altogether there were a bit less than 10,000 volunteers who took part, and there were some uprisings in the area as well. There were several different incursions which happened in the area, but the end result was that the Finnish state stayed out of these, and they eventually died. All right, here are some of the requirements from the separatist Karelia movement that they promote. And yes, the language is important, and basically they are looking for an independent state. All right, let's check out this video clip and listen to what he has to say. He talks in Russian, but I can interpret this a little bit. So he is a leader of this organization, Dmitry Kuznetsov, and he's talking about the time after Russia has lost the Ukrainian war and it's weakened, then it's time for uprisings. All of these national autonomous states like around the Russian Empire, and there's no chance for the Russian army to suppress all these uprisings. So I think he looks that to be the chance for gaining independence. And he mentions that he can get maybe 1,000 armed men to take part into this uprising. See what is the situation with the Karelian Patriots, nationalists, separatists, whatever you want to call them. And the most interesting part, I think it is, what is their connection to the war in Ukraine?
My name is Denis Prokopenko. I'm a commander of the Azov regiment. The defense of Mariupol has already been going for 12 days. We as a regiment protectors of Mariupol are successfully fortifying our combat task on the front line. The enemy has not entered the city. Being surrounded since March the 1st by the increasing amount of the enemy troops, our soldiers holding on the defense of an important strategical place, the forepost of the Sea of Azov. The strength of our...
The dramatic message here, what you see, is from year 2022. Quite soon after the invasion, the Russian invasion to Ukraine from Mariupol, Donetsk Oblast. And the gentleman here is the commanding officer of the Azov forces in the city. And this message comes from the Azov stall, from the factory. Denis Prokopenko is the commanding officer of the Azov forces. And he led the battle against the advancing Russian troops for weeks in horrendous conditions in the Azovstal factory area. They were underground and they fought very gallantly. And Denis Prokopenko is a hero of Ukraine. But just to make a long story short, they were captured eventually and taken as prisoners of war. Then after some years, I think year or 2 years, they were released or exchanged in a prisoner exchange in Turkey, and he is back in business in Ukraine fighting the war. But what is his connection to East Karelia or Karelia in general? I got to know that already some years back when I saw him wearing Karelian flag, shoulder patch flag, and then some Finnish newspapers made a newspaper story out of it. But as far as I know, I don't know if he has any connection to the actual East Karelian or Karelian freedom fighters or liberation movement, or is he just showing his sympathy and support because of his family ties? I have no. If you know anything about this, please comment on the comment section below. Okay, let's talk about the actual Karelians that are part of the Karelian independence movement, and they are fighting in Ukraine. As far as I know, and most of my information is based on newspaper articles and Wikipedia and in general internet. So some of the information might be a bit outdated, but as far as I know, there is a group called Karelian Group, and they had been part of the Ukrainian army serving in the Russian Volunteer Corps or under the Russian Volunteer Corps. There are some indications that they might be serving under the International Brigade as well. There's been different names, the Karelian Group Nord or Nord, and then Karelian National. I think the important thing here is that, as we know, the Russian Secret Service, FSB, is almost certainly active infiltrating these kind of organizations, which are separatist organizations. Like there are a couple of different Karelia organizations. So you can never really trust everybody who's involved in the activities. There are informers, that's 100% sure. But what makes this different, when these guys go over to Ukraine and they fight there shoulder to shoulder, common enemy, that makes them 100% reliable for the future activities. And this is the important thing for these kind of movements, that you build the trust by being in this kind of extreme conditions as the war definitely is in Ukraine. So I think that is something very significant. So as said, I don't have any video material at this point about these fighters, but there are some pictures online. I'm not gonna post them all here, but you can find them yourself. I think this is a very interesting and even quite surprising development, and let's see how it kind of ends. We all hope that the war ends and Ukraine maintains the total control of its territory, and the Muscovite Russians finally understand that they should concentrate their own area, own business, and forget about dreaming this kind of colonial empire. Those days are over. Alright folks, thanks for watching. Slava Ukraini.